and camera and everything would be enabled. Okay, so that yeah. And also, we have received a lot of people have texted us in one more group also, who were planning to join this demo session because of Sunday. People are or this weekend, sorry, because of Saturdays, some people are not available to join the session. They're looking for recordings. But nevertheless, if you have come, it's good. More or less people we have, and you'll be able to ask your questions accordingly. So what I'll do, Nitish, can we allow mics for everyone so that in case they need to speak, they can speak. Okay, I'm just allowing you
Sure.
mic for everyone. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Ashish, I've allowed the mic for you. Yeah, I have Ashish. Hi, yeah. Okay, your mics are allowed now. You can unmute and you can ask your questions whenever required. Hi, Chirag. So Chirag will be our instructor for this network automation training. And Chirag, over to you, and we can quickly start and give everyone a brief idea about it. And meanwhile, Chirag, could you please start the recording? Okay, it is already started. Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi guys. Hi. Thank you, Deepanshu, for the introduction. So hello everyone. My name is Chirag and welcome to PyNet Labs. So as Deepanshu mentioned, I'll be the trainer for the upcoming trainings of DevNet. And I welcome you all in this demo session where we are going to discuss about how we cover the DevNet content and how we understand the topics related to network automation. So I'm super excited. Let's get started. Let's begin the session. And as you guys know that you are allowed to use the mic. So whenever you want to ask your questions or put up your doubts, you can raise your hands, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I'll be there to guide you. So the very first thing which we will be talking about today is how DevNet works, because we need to understand this certification first before we get started with the topics, right? So let's try to understand Cisco DevNet. So for those who are not very well aware how this works, basically DevNet is a new line of certifications which Cisco introduced, and this is all about network automation. The training which we will be looking forward to at the associate level is going to be for DevNet Associate with the paper code of 200901. Now, when I talk about the Cisco's provided official syllabus for this, then we get 6 sections here. The first section explains us about software development. And designing. Then we look into how to use APIs. Then we talk about Cisco's provided platforms. So we can say Cisco platforms and their developments. Then we talk about application deployment and security. And then some of the infrastructure related automation. And lastly, we look into the network fundamentals. So this is the official syllabus which we have got for Cisco DevNet Associate exam. But the good part, or we can say the best thing about joining this training program with PyNet Labs would be that we will definitely cover this section, which are mentioned here. But along with that, we have customized the program in a manner which can allow you to understand or to get the knowledge of Python basics also. So we'll be talking about the Python from very scratch in this training program, because when Cisco provides you this syllabus, they expect some of the programming understanding from you guys. But we, as we work with industry, we know that network engineers don't usually get time to explore such programming languages like Python, Java, or any other programming language. So we have customized this in a manner where we discuss, first of all, the Python basics. We spend a good amount of time on understanding the fundamentals of Python, which we need in the network automation journey. Then we get to the DevNet associate topics. We explore all of them. We discuss about each and every detail related to them. And additionally, as we can say as a bonus thing, we have the Ansible also here in this program. So we will not just be covering the official syllabus, but we will also be talking about the Python. So if you are not sure how Python works or even how any programming language works, then also you are a good fit to begin for the CCNA DevNet Associate exam. So this, as I mentioned, will be covering the Python basics. We'll be talking about the official syllabus. Then Ansible basics will also be a part of this training program. So how I will take it ahead, I'll quickly show you the outline of that. The first thing we will be talking about in the program is going to be Introduction to SDN. First of all, I'll make you guys understand. Yes, Dipanshu.
Yeah. Chirag, so quick more, one more thing. I think few more people have joined. We have AJ, Ankit, Asif, Bhushan, and Hridyansh, as well as, yeah, they have joined recently. Sagar has joined recently. So, guys, could you just give us a brief about what you're doing in your jobs right now and why you're planning to learn network automation in the chat box, just quickly, so that we can choose the topic for this demo class as well accordingly. That do you have any idea about network automations beforehand, or what do you want to understand in this demo class? What do you want to see exactly that you will be able to study it? What is your main objective also? It would be just another second if you can, share the meanwhile. Yeah, Chirag, please continue. Meanwhile, people will be sharing in the chat box.
Sure. Thank you, Dipanshu. Yes, guys, please put the details in the chat box so that we can get the best out of this session. So now in this case, I was saying that the first thing we'll be exploring in the training is going to be SDN. Now, SDN is quite a word which everyone of you must have heard of. It stands for Software Defined Networking. This is a new way of managing and controlling the networks. So it is pretty much important to understand how it works and how automation can help us in this new world of networking. Once you are good with that, then we'll get our hands on the Python fundamentals and we'll talk about all the things related to Python where we discuss about various data types like how the Python lists work, what are Python strings, what are Python integers, how dictionaries work, what are the functions related to them. Then we also talk about conditionals, how conditionals can help us in various kind of environments, then how for loops work, and then so on. So each and every detail which we need to understand to get started with the network automation journey will be covered in this section. Now, I will be spending a good amount of time on this because I understand this point that when you are good with Python fundamentals, when you are good with these concepts, you will automatically get better with the network automation because this section here, this discussion here will give you the ability to think like a programmer. So I'll make sure that you guys are getting a good amount of understanding on this. Once we are good with those things, once we are pretty much confident with Python fundamentals and Python basics, then only we'll get started with the network automation basics. So we'll talk about how network automation works. So we'll talk about how network automation works, how we can configure multiple devices all together using a single Python script, how we can configure multiple interfaces just by using a single Python script, then how we can minimize the efforts by just writing a script and not doing the task again and again. All those things, all those basics we will understand here in the network automations. And then once we have got the good idea of how it works in the productions, how it can be utilized in order to minimize the manual efforts, then we will discuss about the most crucial part of our training, which is model-driven programmability. So by the time we reach model-driven programmability, you can expect from yourself that you will have a good amount of understanding of how automation works in real life. And then when we talk about model-driven programmability, we discuss various important or crucial protocols like netconf, restconf, Then we will be discussing about some data structuring languages like XML, JSON, data modeling languages like Yang. Then once we have discussed about all of them, we have understood the difference between the basic automation and model-driven programmability. Right after that, we'll jump on to REST APIs. So we'll get the introduction to how APIs work. We'll try to see how REST API can help me in order to configure controllers like ASA, like we have got the GUI access of ASA. So we'll see how it works with ASA. We'll try to explore what all API documentations are available for other controllers like vManager for DNA Center. We'll talk about those things also. After this, we'll be talking about application deployment and application security. We'll talk about version control system. Popularly, you must have heard of Git and GitHub. So that is what we discuss here in this section. Then once we are good with all the remaining theoretical topics, according to the DevNet Associate syllabus, after that, we'll jump on to Ansible basics. So this is where you will get the understanding of Ansible as well. And this will help you in preparing for the future of network automation. So you're not just getting the DevNet associate content, but you are also being prepared with the Ansible stuff. So you will get to see how Ansible works, what is the structure of Ansible, and along with that, we'll also see how configurations can be deployed using Ansible. So configuration deployment using Ansible. That's we can say is going to be a outline which we follow in the training. All right, let me see what we have got in the chat. How to start network programming. Okay, basics of network automation. Cool. So how to start network programming requires, as I mentioned, the Python fundamentals, requires the understanding of Python. So that is a quite a long topic to discuss right now. That would take around 4 to 6, or we can say even 6 to 8 hours of discussion. So as I mentioned, we'll be spending a good amount of time on that in the training. As of now, we can have a look at how the network automation basics work, which is also mentioned by Siddharth. So we can definitely have a look into that. This will give you a good idea of how, I mean, it works in the production environment, and it's going to be really exciting to see how the tasks which we do by writing multiple commands on the router can just be done by a single click. So let's discuss that. I hope everyone is good with this topic. All right, perfect. So we can begin with the discussion of basics of network automation, how it works with simple devices like iOS router or iOS switch. So I will first of all show you how we will begin or what is going to be the setup of lab. Another important thing related to labs. So for the participants of the training, will be helping you all with the lab setups on your local machines so that you have the access to it whenever you want and you can practice as much as you want. You will have it for lifetime. You can practice whenever you want as it is going to be there on your local devices. And we, PyNet Labs, will help you in setting it up. So no need to worry about those things also. Now what I'll do is I'll use a simulator called EVNG. And in EVNG, I'll place a iOS router, which I'll connect with a network module. This EVNG is working on my Windows machine. So this router, which is connected to network module, will be able to communicate from my Windows machine. So basically this thing here, the network module, I have defined or I have configured it in a manner so that when I ping it from my Windows machine, I can send it to my router. So a connectivity can be established between the router which is inside EVNG and my Windows machine. Now, creating this connectivity helps us in understanding how it works in real life also, because that is what you will get when you get into the production environment also, right? A router and a PC. So this will give you the ability to understand how things work in real life. So we have a similar kind of a setup here. and we will be deploying some configurations on this router from my Windows machine by running some script. Now this script will include some concepts related to Python also. I will try to make things as much easier as I can, but since we are probably not aware of the Python fundamentals, then some few things might sound alien to you. So you can put up your questions regarding those in the chat box. So just allow me a second, I'll quickly share my other screen and then we are good to get started with the lab. Meanwhile, if there is any questions regarding the training program or how things are going to work, you can put your questions in the chat box. Okay, so let me share my screen now. Please confirm once you guys can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you are able to see the screen. Perfect. Let's get started. Now, this is the same setup which I was discussing about. We have a router here, which is connected to some network module. And this basically the setup which we have done is inside the EVE-NG simulator, which is a network simulator. Just like you use Packet Tracer, you might have worked with EVE-NG also. So this is going to be the lab setup. This is my router connected to a network module. If I click on the router, I'll get the access to the device. Right now, the router is booting up, so we can wait for that time. Now, what I need on my router is I need basically some configurations of SSH. So let's talk about what we are going to do now. This is the lab setup. We have a router. We have connected it to our Windows machine. Now, from my Windows machine, I will use a library called netmico, which is going to help me in making configurations on the router very easily. So let's first of all talk about what netmico requires. netmico just requires SSH connectivity to your device. So what I need is I just need a router which is configured with SSH and I am good to configure it using network automation. That's it. Now netmico, what is netmico? Let's talk about that a little bit. I'll open my notepad here. So netmico. Now netmico is a library which will help you in establishing SSH connection with network devices. netmico is a library which will help you in establishing SSH connection with network devices. What else it is capable of? First thing, it is capable of creating a SSH connection. Second thing, we can say it is capable of pushing configurations on the device. Third thing, fetching details from the device. So network automation is not just about making configuration onto the routers by using Python or some network automation tools. It is also about how we can fetch out the configurations from the device. So we all are aware of show commands, right? We run show IP interface brief, show IP route, show running config. All these show commands help us in monitoring the device in a better way, right? So in the production environments, we have to work a lot with these show commands to understand what's going on inside the network. So how you can minimize the efforts using libraries like netmico to fetch out the details, that is also what you will get to know in this particular program. Then talking about this netmico library, so is it just going to be working, like is it just going to work with Cisco devices? No. Cisco, Juniper, Arista, Palo Alto, Huawei, it has a wide supportability. So netmico is currently supporting around 80, 85 different platforms. So we have a huge list of supporting devices. But the work, or we can say the configurations, they work like the structure it works in is going to be same for all. So we will be exploring it with Cisco devices, but it can definitely be used with the other devices also. Then when we talk about netmico, we have three important modules. The first module is connect handler. Connect handler is, we can say, a module which will help us in enabling the SSH connection. Then another module we have is send config set. Send config set is used for pushing configurations in global config mode. Then we have send command, which we use for fetching details from the device. So tell me, if I wish to run show IP route on my router using netmico, which module should I use? Should I use connect handler or send config set or send command? What do you think? Let me know in the chat box. I want to run show IP route. Any guesses, guys? What do you think? Send command, perfect. Absolutely correct. So send command, which we use for fetching details from the device, is going to be the module which I need to use if I want to run the command show IP route. Similarly, if I am willing to configure OSPF, then it's going to be send config set. But even before that, connect handler has to be used to create a SSH connection with the device, right? That's the first important thing. So let's talk a little more about connect handler. Now, in order to use this connect handler, we need to pass some certain arguments. We need to pass some important, or we can say mandatory information, like device type. What type of device is it? You have to specify that, whether it is an iOS device, whether it is an iOS XE device, iOS XR device. So whatever device type you have to specify that. Like in this scenario, we have a Cisco iOS device, so we'll mention Cisco underscore iOS. Other than that, you need to specify the address, what IP of that device is. So whatever IP you have, you can specify that. So 10.255.2.101. After that, the username you can use to log into the device. Let's say admin is the username, then password. Let's say Cisco is the password. So we have these four required arguments which we have to pass in order to be able to use connect handler. So what does that mean? Now it simply means that if I want to connect with the router, then I have to tell what type of router it is or what type of OS I have on router, what is the IP of the router, what is the username, what is the password of that router. And then connect handler will create the SSH connection for me. So we will be trying out a lab where we will be using all these three modules to make configuration and then to also fetch out the details from the device. So let's get started. The very first thing I need is I need SSH configurations on my router. So let's begin the configuration on the device. We have this topology here right in front of us. The router also is ready to be configured. Enable config T, host name R1. First thing I'll do is I'll go to interface gig 0/0 and I will assign the IP address there 10.255.2.101/24 subnet and then no shutdown exit. After setting the IP, I'll also configure the domain name for the SSH IP domain name domain-name pynet.com. After that, we'll begin with creating the crypto key generate RSA general keys modulus 1024. Now I will enable SSH version 2 by saying IP SSH version 2. Enter. It's taking quite a time to load. Yeah. So after that, we have to run the command IP SSH version 2 to begin to enable SSH version. And then after that, we will create a username, let's say admin, privilege, we'll give it to 15, and then the password will configure as Cisco. Then I'll enter into the virtual terminals, line vdy 0 space 4, login local, transport input all, exit. This completes the configuration of SSH on my router. Now I have to write a script which can make configurations on my router using the netmico library. So for writing these scripts, I'll be using IDE, Integrated Development Environment, called VS Code, Visual Studio Code. This is a, we can say, program which we can use for writing programming scripts. Here inside this, I'll open a new file. That's going to be a Python file. So I'll select Python file and I will save it first of all with the name ssh_r1. And here's my file ready to begin with the scripting program. Now, the very first thing I'll do is I'll import my module called connect handler from the library netmico. So for doing that, I'll have to write a line into my script from netmico import connect handler. So let's try to understand what we are trying to achieve from line number 1. Now, line number 1 says from the library netmico import connect handler. By writing this line, I'll be able to use the module connect handler into my current script. So it is quite an important line, or we can say this is something which will enable the use of connect handler in this particular script. After that, I need to define the 4 required arguments. Do you remember? The device type, the IP, the username, the password. This we will define inside a dictionary. So we'll say R1 is equals to a dictionary. Dictionary is a type of Python data, which we will be discussing in the training. In the dictionary, we create key and value pairs. So the key name, first of all, is going to be device underscore type. And the value to that is going to be Cisco underscore iOS, comma. Next thing I need to define is the host address. So host colon 10.255.2.101. That's the IP which I have configured, right? So I'll mention that. Then username colon admin like this, and then password colon Cisco like this. So I have given all the required or mandatory information which I have to pass for using connect handler. Now it's time to initiate a session. So we'll create a variable called SSH where we will be using the connect handler to create a session with the R1. So what we are writing here is we are writing that SSH is going to be a variable. We can say a container which contains the network connection with my router number 1. But why am I putting these stars before it? So this is something related to Python. When we use dictionary somewhere in a function, we have to put double star before that so that Python can recognize R1 as a dictionary. So inside R1, what values do we have? We have all the required values, which my connect handler wants to create a connection with the device, right? So we are defining this connectivity first of all. Now, next thing I'll define is the commands. So commands I have to write in a list. How do we create list? We create it using square brackets. Inside this, I will write down the commands which I want to send on my router. Let's say I'm willing to configure a loopback 10. So I'll write down the commands for that. I'll say interface loopback 10. That's going to be my first command, right? After that, we put the IP on it by saying IP space address and then 192.168.10.1 space 255.255.255.0, and then we can add a description here configured using Python. So these are the 3 commands which I want to send on my router. But my question is, what module should I use to send these commands? Let me know in the chat. Should I use send config set or should I use send command? Send config set, absolutely correct. So I will say that I want to send these commands, but that I will store inside a variable called interface configs. Interface configs is equals to, we want to run a function against the SSH connection. So I'll say SSH dot send config set. Here we have bracket. What I want to send, I want to send the commands. So I'll call my list called commands like this. Then in order to look into the execution, I can say print interface configs. Now we have to save the script and we have to run it to test whether that works or not. But before that, let's verify, do we have any loopback on router number 1 or not? Show IP interface brief. So we just have 4 physical interfaces, nothing else, right? Now I'll run the script and let's see what happens after that. So it went into the configuration mode automatically, right? We didn't mention configure terminal command, but it went inside the configuration mode. Why? Because I use the module send config set, which is simply defined to send the commands in the configuration mode. So it doesn't matter whether you write it or not, it will automatically get into the config mode. There it created the loopback 10 configuration and then close the session. So I can verify the loopback on my CLI also. And there you go. We have the loopback 10, 192.168.10.1 is the IP. Make sense? If there is any questions regarding this, then please let me know in the chat box. Meanwhile, what I'll do is I will also try to print out the details of show IP interface brief by using another module, which is send command. So I'll say interface underscore details is equals to ssh dot. This time I will use the module send command and I will send the command show IP interface brief. Show IP interface brief. Then we can say print interface details to look into the output of that. Print interface details. Let's modify the script a little bit. Let's make it loopback 11 so that we can see the difference, and the IP will be 192.168.11.1. Let's save the changes and try to run it again. There you go. This time it created the loopback 11, but along with that, it also printed out the details of show IP interface brief. So we can see loopback 10 there. We can see the loopback 11 there, 192.168.11.1. But now I have a question here that if, for example, now I want to create loopback 15, so shall I modify the script again? And then if I want to create loopback 16, so I will have to modify the script again, right? So that's not going to help us anyhow. Just to write 3 commands, I am writing a script of around 15 to 18 lines. And every time I want to create a new loopback, I have to modify the script. How is it helping me? I think it is making the efforts even more than what we see in the direct configurations. Don't you think like that? The reason we can say this right now is because we haven't modified the script much. We are simply sending some values to my router, right? Absolutely, Bhushan. That is what I was about to discuss. So what we can achieve else is we can create more variables. We can make it more object oriented. We can add in more objects to make the tasks even easier for us. So let's see how that will be done. So once I have the connectivity, I will ask about few things to my user. I'll ask about the interface name. How do we ask about some information? We use the function called input. So we'll write the input function and I will ask about enter the name of interface. Something like this. Then I'll ask about the interface IP. So int underscore IP is equals to input bracket, enter the name of, sorry, enter the IP of interface. What next do I need to know? I need to know the interface mask also. So interface mask is equals to input bracket, enter the interface mask. Last thing, description. So int underscore description is equals to input bracket, enter the interface description. Now the task is to use these variables instead of these static values. So let's remove loopback 11, which is a static value, and let's call my variable. I will use something called as concatenation operator, which simply is the addition or the plus sign. So this will basically add the statement interface with the int name. So whatever value will be provided to this question, enter the name of the interface, that will be used here, making the command complete. Similarly, I'll remove the static values from the IP address command and I will add interface IP plus I'll have to put a space and then interface mask. Then I can remove description And then I can say I want to call interface description. Then one more command I can add here, no shutdown, so that in case I'm configuring some physical interface, that particular interface can be brought up. Now, one more thing to understand here. What is this? Or why are we putting a space after DESC description? Why are we putting after address? Why do we have so many spaces here? So this is because we want to match the CLI syntax. Now let's try to remember the command which we write for creating interface. What do we do? Let's come back to the notepad. If I want to create a loopback interface, first thing I write is interface, then I put a space, then I put the name loopback 10 to whatever, right? Then similarly, IP space address space the IP space the subnet, then description space, then whatever description I want to send, and then no shutdown. Now in my Python script, when my values will be provided, so those values are supposed to be separated according to the CLI syntax, right? I need to separate those values with a space. So that is what we are adding by using this value here. Similarly, after IP address, I have left a space. After the interface, I have left a space so that it can match the CLI syntax. Now it's time to test it. Let's see whether it can help me in configuring a physical interface or not. I'll run the script, enter the name of interface, let's say gig 0/2. Right now we can see here gig 0/2 is not configured. So it is asking me enter the IP, let's say 192.168.2.1. Enter the mask 255.255.255.0. Description configured using Python by Chirag. And the task is done for us. 192.168.2.1 is the IP. But what is the benefit of bringing in variables? We are not specifying any static value. If I run the script again, I can configure gig 0/1 now using the same script, even without making any modifications. I can configure loopbacks. Now this thing can be done multiple times also by using for loops. So I'll quickly add that. Now this might go a little advanced if you don't have any understanding of Python, but no worries. When we will be covering this in the training, so we'll be spending a good amount of time in functions like these. So what I'll do is I will bring in a for loop here into the scenario, which can even allow me to create more than one interface configuration in single time. So let's see how will that work. So I'll create a for loop for ABC, let's say in a range bracket 0, let's say 2. So this line here for ABC in range 0, 2 will help me in performing these lines or in executing these lines 2 times. I can even define this number as per the user choice. So I can ask my user how many interfaces are you willing to configure. So user choice int of input bracket, enter the number of interface you want to configure. Then I can put that number here by calling the variable user choice instead of 2. So basically now whatever number will be provided to my for loop, it will execute the remaining commands that number of time. If my user says I want to configure 5 interfaces, then these commands will be executed 5 times. So let's test this and let's see whether that works or not. So I'm going to run the script. Let me delete it and then run it again so that we can see it nicely. The first question, enter the number of interface you want to configure. I want to configure 2 interfaces. Enter the name of interface, let's say loopback 22. Enter the IP 22.22.22.22 mask/24. Description, loopback 22. It configures the loopback 22, prints out the details of show IP interface brief, then is asking me again, enter the name of interface. Now this question is about the second interface which I want to configure. So I want to configure loopback 33. Enter the IP 33.33.33.33. Enter subnet mask/24. Description, loopback 33. And there you go. Loopback 33 is also created. Similarly, I can create 5, 7, 10, whatever number of interfaces I want just by bringing it inside for loops. Just like this, I can even configure multiple routers altogether. So for example, I want to create 5 interfaces on router 1, router 2, router 3, router 4. So just by using a for loop, I can tell my script to connect with all those 4 routers one by one and create the 5 interfaces on them. So all this is possible through network automation. I hope this gives you a good idea of how things work when we talk about network automation. Now, there are multiple use cases of Python scripts in the production environment. Like, for example, you want to fetch out the running configuration every day at 8 p.m. from, let's say, 10 routers. So if I do this manually, then I have to go to the router one by one. I have to run show running config. Then I have to export it to a text file and save it. And then go to the router 2, then do the same process for the router 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. But just by writing a Python script, the whole thing can be done automatically. You can even tell your script to get executed every day at 8 p.m. without even the requirement of clicking this button. So the script would automatically get executed at 8 p.m. We'll go to all the 10 routers, we'll fetch out the running configuration, we'll even save it into a text file for you. That is also possible. So even if I want to export these details which I have printed here, if I want to export them to a text file, then that is also achievable. Let me show it to you. I'll create a new text file here and let's save it with the name output. Now all I need is I need to just copy the path of my file. Come back to my script. I'll say my file is equals to open bracket, specify the path. Then in the Python, we have to change the single slash to double slash so that the Python can identify the path. Just like we have to add double star. So these are some rules which we have to follow. And then after defining the path, we have to give it the permissions, whether I want to give the writing permission, so I can give W. If I want to give the reading permissions, I can give R. If I want to give appending permission, I can give A. So as of now, I'll give writing permissions, and then I'll say that I want to write something inside my file, which means I want to write my file dot write bracket. What I want to write is I want to write interface details. Let's save this and let's try to run this again to observe what do we get after that in the output.txt. Right now it is empty, right? If I run this again, enter the number of interface, one interface, loopback 44, let's say, IP 44.44.44.44, mask 255.255.255.0, description, loopback 44. Okay, everything is done, but if I now go and check my output.txt, then we can see the output there also. It automatically exported the show IP interface brief details into the output.txt. So just like that, we can also export the other informations like the running configurations, the routing table, the log reports, all of that can be done simply by writing such scripts. So we have a question, how is the integration of Python with the device that is pushing the config on the router? Python tool with the device is pushing the config on the router. So Siddharth, if your question is how netmico is sending this payload which we are defining to the router, if that is the question, then it is being done with the help of SSH connection. So the transportation is done through the SSH protocol here. And that is the reason why we need SSH configurations, first of all, on the device before getting started with the netmico configurations. So it takes the data from our side, it takes up the payload and sends it to the router, makes the configurations there. Okay, what else questions do we have? Any other questions? Any questions maybe you want to ask whether something XYZ situation is possible through automation or not, or any other example which you guys want me to show you, like OSPF, EIGRP configurations, all of that is possible.
So Chirag, I can see one another question in the chat box from by Bhushan Chavan. He is asking about, can we create a variable instant of value to avoid extra effort?
Yes, Nitish, this was addressed earlier. So yes, Bhushan, and yes, everyone, guys. So we can definitely create variables like this by writing the input functions to remove the extra efforts and to directly take the inputs from our user. Any other questions, guys? Any doubts related to the program or related to what we have discussed right now?
Okay, all right then, perfect. So we are good to go. So this was just a glimpse about Python and how we are going to use Python for doing scripting, and with the help of scripting, how we are going to do the automation. So I hope you guys learn a lot of things regarding Python and scripting. So mostly you are going to learn advanced version of the same for doing network automation. So I hope like we have already recorded the session. If some of the participant miss some of the things, so definitely after 2 or 3 days you can access the same recording on our YouTube channel. Yeah. So yes, Ashish just asked one another question. We only need to know Python fundamentals. Yes, Ashish. So this session is only for the Python fundamentals. Later on, when you join our upcoming batches of DevNet Associate, there we are going to learn in depth about Python and network automation. So I think you are there in our job guarantee program. So later on, once you complete your CCNA and CCNP, then we'll proceed for the next course that will be your Python and CCNA DevNet only. Yeah. So is there any other queries apart from this? Okay. Considering no for the silence. So, all right. I think we are good to go.
Okay, we have another question. What is the career path in network automation? So there is a wide, we can say, opportunity which we have after the CCNA DevNet program. You can proceed ahead with your CCNP certifications. You can proceed ahead with CCIE. As well as you already know, we have a huge demand of automation right now in the industry, right? The organizations are not just looking for someone who can configure networking protocols, but can also minimize the effort by bringing automation into the scenario. So I can definitely ensure that this currently has a huge demand. So it's a very right time to begin with the network automation right now because it's high in demand in the industry right now.
Correctly mentioned by Chirag here. Like in all the certifications as well, now network automation is there. Around 15 or 10 to 15% portion of the content is related to network automation, be it enterprise track or security or data center or any other track. Yeah. All right then. Yes. Thanks to you all for joining the session. We will definitely see you all if in the any other session or mostly in the training of Python and DevNet Associate. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks to all for your time. All right. Bye bye.
Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the session. See you in the training program.